43-year-old Sherry Miller has multiple sclerosis.
And Mrs. Marjorie Wants.
58-year-old Marjorie Wants has suffered with acute pelvic pain for years.
Miller. Sherry, have you thought this over well?
Yeah, I have. I thought about it a long time. Long time. Yeah, I have. And I have no qualms about my decision. I could do it tonight.
You realize, of course, the implications of your decision.
Yeah, I do.
What is the implication of your decision?
There's no turning back.
In the corner of the room is Sharon Welsh, Sherry Miller's best friend since childhood.
She's a tiny, real short and tiny, but bubbly. And she was a nice person to know. She wasn't a cheerleader. She wasn't a class officer. But I'll bet 90% of the people, if you'd go back and ask, did they know who she was? They knew who Sherry Miller was.
As adults, Sharon and Sherry remained friends, sharing the good times. And then about 12 years ago, the worst news of all.
And my mom called me one day and said, Sherry's ill, and she has MS. And we just cried. We just cried.
As the disease worsened, Sherry's husband divorced her and took custody of their house and their children. Finally, with nowhere else to go, Sherry moved back into her parents' house.
The doctors couldn't help her. The doctors couldn't stop the progression. They couldn't make the MS go away. And she started telling me about a letter that she had written to this doctor that helped people commit suicide.
When you first contacted me, Sherry, did you write that letter by
Yes,
yourself?
I did, yeah. Yep,
Now you can't write at all.
No.
You can barely make an X, is that right?
right, yeah.
You can't even direct your hand to the paper,
No.
can you?
Sherry Miller had approached Kevorkian about the same time as Janet Atkins, but he was concerned Sherry's family did not yet support her wish to die, and so he put her off too, and asked that she see a psychiatrist. But Sherry kept pursuing Kevorkian, telling her story repeatedly on television. She even testified for Kevorkian in the Janet Atkins case.
I should have done something sooner when I was capable of doing something on my own.
That poor girl was in misery every day, and I really made her go on over a year with more misery. But the family, the folks came around then. That's happened to several patients of mine.
And I've been told they can't do anything. Every surgery has made me worse, especially the last one.
How many have you had?
10
10 surgeries?
in the one spot. In the one spot, and this time he left a needle up there and he won't take it out. No doctor will take it out. Yeah,
Marjorie Wants had also pursued Dr. Kevorkian for years, asking for relief from the excruciating pain she had suffered following surgery to remove some benign vaginal tumors.
I've known her going on 2.5 years now, and you notice I haven't done anything with her because I knew there was more to be done. Her doctors had to do more surgery, they had to have more pain medication.
Well, when we were on television recently in the Dana show, how's your situation been since then? Has there been any improvement at all?
No.
Has it gotten worse or about the same?
It's gotten worse.
Not even the same?
Not even the same. I get a half hour, an hour sleep at night with all the pills and sleeping pills I take. I go to bed all day long, most of the time, with sleeping pills just to get out of the pain. That's the only time I get out of the pain is when I sleep.
Despite her pain, Marjorie Wants was not terminally ill. Authorities had tried to institutionalize her for mental problems. Psychiatrists said she was depressed and suicidal. Some felt her pain was psychosomatic. And later, when the medical examiner, Dr. L.J. Dragovich, conducted Marjorie's autopsy, he could find no physical cause for her pain.
This pelvic pain would have been some type of phantom pain coming from her head, not from the lower part of her body, because she simply didn't have anything there and there was no disease process.
But Marjorie Wants was the only one who was not terminal, but probably the most justified of all. And for this reason, she was in the worst pain. she had the prospect of going through another 10, 20 years of pain that was unimaginable.
I see her in her pain every day.
Marjorie's husband tells Kevorkian his wife often screams through the night in pain, and that she has tried to kill herself several times.
I have tried loading a gun, but I don't know how to load one. If I did, I probably would have, as Bill says, I probably wouldn't have succeeded, and I would have been in worse shape than I am right now.
As the consultation tape rolls on, Kevorkian seems relaxed, very relaxed for a man about to enter another firestorm. But then Jack Kevorkian had been preparing for the role of Dr. Death for most of his life. In the 1950s, as a young pathology resident, Kevorkian asked to work the hospital's night shift because more people died at night. He wanted to do some research, to photograph the eyes of patients at the exact moment of death.
They say, why are you looking in the eyes? It's before transplantation, see? I says, well, someday it'll be useful to know when the body had died, so how many minutes you got left to do so. Transplantation did it. Or now brain-dead people, you can tell by looking in the eyeball if there's circulation to the brain. You don't need this $50,000 machine.
He wrote papers arguing that men on death row, if they consented, could be put to sleep before execution. Experiments could then be performed on them or their organs removed for transplant, and other lives could be saved. During the Vietnam War, Kevorkian experimented with another idea, transfusing blood directly from the dead to the living.
Here's something that with a wounded soldier and a dead soldier, and you look at their dog tags, and if they got the same blood type, pump the blood from the heart of the dead man into the living man. So we wanted to test it in Vietnam, under battle conditions. Turned down.
Kevorkian always seemed willing, even eager, to take a provocative stand. In the 1960s and 70s, his one-man show of surreal paintings featured titles like Fever, Genocide, and Death. Kevorkian's death research effectively destroyed his medical career. By the time he invented his suicide machine in the late 1980s, no hospital would hire him.
He's worked very hard all his life, and much of it without success, and because the ideas were so controversial.
Ironically, a patient's right to die was not the big idea that animated Kevorkian's unorthodox career. It was his search for anything useful, blood, organs, knowledge that could be salvaged from death. And on the last night of their lives, Kevorkian tries to sell Sherry Miller and Marjorie Wantz on donating their organs.
Surgeons would take organs because that's the way they prefer to get them. But the same way, option 3, is to do...
But the cuckoo clock cuts him off. Both women decline his suggestion and begin to question Kevorkian about his suicide machine.
There's a lot of tubes. A lot of tubes. Yeah, there's the salt solution, which we start. Needle injection into the vein for each of you, and then it's a fork. I had to make a Y connection. I couldn't.
But are we together?
You're side by side.
Okay, that's
And there's a little
fine.
space between you. There's a stool. I got a little stool, and on the stool I've clamped the device. It's a mechanical device. Made out of wood. This is made out of wood.
Not sheep.
Kevorkian has set up this double suicide because he is not sure what police and prosecutors will do to him afterward. He has told the two women if he helps only one of them, he might not be around to help the other.
Okay, well then we'll bring this to a close. Thank you very much, all of you.
Early the next morning, they all gathered at a rustic cabin in Bald Mountain State Park near Detroit. Marjorie Wantz went first.
And she was gone by use of the device within 10 seconds. It was a remarkable thing to see. She didn't move. It was so peaceful that I have said to my brother, that's the way I want to go, if need be, if I am suffering.
But Kevorkian was unable to insert the IV in Sherry Miller's veins and had to improvise with an alternate method, carbon monoxide gas.
In the case of Sherry Miller, so Jack said, okay, Sherry, you saw what happened. You can change your mind. We don't need to go on. We can come back another day. And Sherry just looked at him and raised her arm, the only one she could raise, and said, next
was almost like, come on, you guys, I've waited long enough. Let's do this. And I held her head up, and Dr. Kevorkian put the mask on her face. And she had already practiced pulling. The screwdriver was taped to a nozzle. Sherry wasn't able to turn the nozzle herself, but she could pull the screwdriver toward her that would start the gas. And I don't know whether Dr. Kevorkian said to her, whenever you're ready, or exactly what. But she never hesitated. She just reached over and pulled it. And I remember going over to her and holding her hand. And you can still feel that warm hand. And I said to her, it's okay. And she was okay. She was finally at peace.
2 women were found dead in a cabin.
The double suicides outraged the prosecutors, and Kevorkian was again arrested on murder charges.
2 women dead inside the cabin.
Okay, he killed 1 person. Well, now he killed 2. And so I thought, what's going to be the next one? And what I was worried about was that each time he had to make it bigger and better.
If Kevorkian is convicted...
But Michigan still had no law against assisted suicide. And again, all charges were thrown out.
With murder.
Blistering verbal attack against the prosecutor.
Since the death of Janet Atkins, the religious right had been pushing the Michigan legislature to pass a bill to stop Kevorkian, but the legislators were deadlocked. Meanwhile, the Michigan State Board of Medicine revoked Kevorkian's medical license, and the American Medical Association, which opposes physician-assisted suicide, condemned him.
We have to question how much of this is being done for Dr. Kevorkian, for the opportunity to make his mark or at least have his name known. Dr. Kevorkian has been with people that he knew only briefly, whose physicians who knew them for longer periods made far different recommendations. And he's used those patients recurrently, because long after people will not remember who Janet Atkins was or who Mrs. Watts was, they remember who Kevorkian is.
Doctors were particularly critical of how Kevorkian handled the Marjorie Wantz case.
This is one of the most troubling cases from my point of view, just because it's so complicated that I have no doubt that Dr. Kevorkian doesn't have the skill to assess this kind of a patient. You would need a lot of real experts to get involved and provide some input, and there's a lot of work to be done. Is her pain relieved as much as it possibly could be? Is depression or other psychiatric disorder ruled out in every way that's possible? And I think there's a tremendous room for wondering about that. Certainly not something you could assess based on 1 or 2 visits.
But Kevorkian continued to act. He assisted another woman suffering with multiple sclerosis, then 2 more women with cancer, a retiree with Lou Gehrig's disease, and a nurse with emphysema. When the Michigan legislature finally passed a ban on assisted suicide designed to take effect on March 30th, 1993, Kevorkian's pace quickened. A 53-year-old lumberjack with cancer became his 9th patient. 2 weeks later, 2 more cancer patients died together. Then another woman with MS, and then patient number 13.
We'll introduce ourselves. On my right is the patient, Mr. Hugh Gale. And I'm Dr. Kevorkian, and on my left is his wife, Cheryl Gale.
It is January 26, 1993. The new law will go into effect in 2 months, and dozens of desperate people are clamoring for Kevorkian's help.
Now, Mr. Gale, what is it that you wish? Put it in plain English.
Relief.
What do you mean by relief?
Well, Well, I can't